this one. Mm-hmm. positions of black leadership.
Thank you.
I want to begin with a question about Brown v. Ford. I know it was decided the year before you entered elementary school, but did you have some sense that this was a big deal?
Well, not at the time. Big deal was when multiplication tables, how to add, those sorts of things. But it was, as the years went on, particularly 56, 57, you got a sense of it because there was quite a bit of talk about it. My grandfather was very involved with this, for example. So you heard that. You also heard, as I mentioned in my memoir, that we saw the impeachment warrant on Highway 17 going to the county. And I always wondered who this Earl Warren was. And later on, of course, I would figure it out that it was the Chief Justice of the United States, and he was in trouble in part because of Brown.
I guess there's no way I could say, did you ever think that you'd be sitting in the building where Earl Warren worked?
Well, not only didn't I think of that, I didn't think that I would ever see the building.
Now, as you found out what it meant as you grew older, did you have some idea of what it might mean, what it could mean, as opposed to what it may have turned out to be?
You know, my grandfather was an interesting man. He, of course, dominated our lives. And he felt that as these rights were vindicated, that we had an obligation to measure up, to use them. I'll give you a separate example. When the Savannah Public Library finally desegregated and we were allowed to go to the main library, his point was that we were obligated to use it. That is, we had to show up no matter what, and we had to read books because we finally had a right to do so. So when it came to education, as the rights became available, we had an obligation to use them properly. So he would say to me in 1964 when I went to the seminary, which was previously all white, he said, "Don't shame me and don't shame the race." In other words, you have to perform.
Do you think that the Brown decision had something to do with opening the doors in the seminary that you attended?
Oh, I think the seminary, I think it had an impact in lots of ways, absolutely. That was 1964, that was 10 years later, and things were changing slowly. But absolutely, I think it got the ball rolling. I think it changed attitudes, and it changed the legal arrangements. People like Phyllis Kravitz, who's on the 11th Circuit now, she was on the board of education in Savannah, and started moving things in that direction back then. And so in talking with her and people like W.W. Law in Savannah, and previously before that, Saul C. Johnson ran the Informer in Savannah. Absolutely. So there was a combination of things that moved us in that direction. So yes, it did have an impact.
But yet at the same time, you've been critical of the jurisprudence that created Brown.
Oh, I think not critical in that sense. It could have been stronger in the sense that, we all, when we do opinions, you look at another opinion and you say, well, I don't agree with this approach or that, but no, not with the bottom line, obviously.
So what do you think it has turned out to mean, the Brown decision, all these years later?
Oh, I think it really did something that could have been done back when Plessy was decided in the 1890s, and that is to affirm something that's clear in the 14th Amendment, and that is that all citizens have the same rights. All citizens. Talk about it. My grandfather was very involved with the NAACP, for example, so you heard that. You also heard, or as I mentioned when I wrote my memoirs, that we saw the impeach Earl Warren signs along Highway 17 going to Liberty County. And I always wondered who this Earl Warren was. And later on, of course, I would figure it out that it was the Chief Justice of the United States, and he was in trouble in part because of Brown.
I guess there's no way I could say, did you ever think that you'd be sitting in the building where Earl Warren worked?
Well, not only didn't I think that, I didn't think that I'd ever see where he worked.
Now, as you found out what it meant as you grew older, did you have some idea of what it might mean, what it could mean, as opposed to what it may have turned out to
know, my grandfather was an interesting man. He, of course, dominated our lives. And he felt that as these rights were vindicated, that we had an obligation to measure up, to use them. I'll give you a separate example. When the Savannah Public Library finally desegregated and we were allowed to go to the main library, his point was that we were obligated to use it. That is, we have to show up no matter what, and we have to read books because we finally had the right to do so. So when it came to education, as the rights became available, we had an obligation to use them properly. So he would say to me in 1964 when I went to the seminary, which was previously all white, he said, "Don't shame me and don't shame the race." In other words, you have to perform.
Do you think that the Brown decision had something to do with opening the doors in the seminary that you attended?
Oh, I think the seminary, I think it had an impact in lots of ways, absolutely. That was 1964, that was 10 years later, and things were changing slowly. But absolutely, I think it got the ball rolling. I think it changed attitudes. It changed the legal arrangements. People like Phyllis Kravitz, who's on the 11th Circuit now, she was on the board of education in Savannah, and started moving things in that direction back then. And so in talking with her and people like W.W. Law in Savannah, and previously before that, Saul C. Johnson, who ran the Informer in Savannah, absolutely. So it was a combination of things that moved us in that direction. So yes, it did have an impact.
But yet at the same time, you've been critical of the jurisprudence that created Brown.
Oh, I think that not critical in that sense. It could have been stronger in the sense that, I mean, we all, when we do opinions, you look at another opinion and you say, well, I don't agree with this approach or that, but no, not with the bottom line, obviously.
So what do you think it has turned out to mean, the Brown decision, all these years later?
Oh, I think it really did something that could have been done back when Plessy was decided in the 1890s, and that is to affirm something that's clear in the 14th Amendment, and that is that all citizens have the same rights, all citizens of the United States, and made it possible, and yes, just in a practical way, for us all to have, or at least have.
This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only.
The Supreme Court. So you've been there almost a quarter century. How would you characterize the role of the court in American society now that you've been a part of it?
I don't think it's changed any over that period, and I think it's a highly respected institution. It was when I came, and I don't think I've destroyed it. I've been impressed that even when we come out with opinions that are highly unpopular or even highly, what should I say, emotion-raising, the people accept them as they should. The case that comes most to mind is the election case, Bush versus Gore. Nobody on the court liked to wade into that controversy, and there was no way the court was going to come out more popular than when it went in, no matter which way it came out. But there was certainly no way we could turn down the petition for circular. I was going to say the case isn't important enough to take. And I think that the public ultimately realized, even those who felt passionately it should have come out the other way, that we had to take the case. And I think the court's reputation survived. Which, after all, is why it has its reputation. I mean, you don't have it to put it up on a shelf and admire it. You have it precisely so that when there comes a time that difficult decisions like that have to be made, it's a sort of armor that enables the decisions to have the kind of public acceptance that they ought to have. I was very, very proud of the way the court's reputation survived that, even though there are a lot of people today probably still mad about it. So I'd say it's one of the most respected institutions in American life.
Justice Robert Jackson once, I think perhaps in the last lecture he gave before his death, that the Supreme Court was not only a law court, but the apex of a branch of government. Is the fact that the court is at the top of a coordinate branch of the federal government shape, or should it shape, our notions of constitutional interpretation? Or is it purely a law court?
Well, it's any appellate court does more than decide the case in front of it. In fact, that's to my mind, the least important thing that the court does. Any appellate court shapes the law, which is why appellate judges ask hypothetical questions, which lawyers don't like. But the reason you ask them is because, frankly, sir or madam, I don't care whether your client wins or loses this case. I am not about to give victory to a seemingly deserving party in this one case at the cost of causing injustice in hundreds of cases down the road. So the primary role of an appellate court, and especially that appellate court which is at the apex, is to decide cases on grounds, on bases that will produce justice overall in the long haul. And the opinions have to be clear enough that the lower courts can follow them. And it's one reason I do not like totality of the circumstances tests, which we occasionally use. It gives no guidance whatever to the lower courts, and therefore does not lay a sound foundation for justice.
Thinking about the court as an institution, we actually had a brief
have, or at least have a possibility to have the same education. I mean, it's, if you look, for example, I happen to be a big sports fan, and when I grew up, games like Georgia, Florida meant nothing. It meant nothing because those schools were segregated. Now, if you had Savannah State playing South Carolina State, that meant something. Or Florida A&M came into town, that meant something. Because we had some connection. But now when you watch the Georgia-Florida game, or you watch the Alabama game, you have such a large number of black athletes involved, so you can see that even there, just from a perception or just sports or entertainment standpoint, it's quite different. And similarly now when you visit the campuses, I go to University of Georgia, that's a campus that was not open to me. And so I think it's changed quite a bit.
So, and you can trace all these to Brown?
Oh,
We do have one more presentation, and we don't have much time, but since the mid-year meeting is now going to be virtual, maybe it won't take as as much time to make the presentation. So, former president, former governor Majumdar is there, and I see on my list that there was going to be a Kyle Bertie here. Is he here too?
Kyle Bertie, and I think Mr. Delegate Bertie is present.
I'm here, just no webcam today.
Okay, good. And you are absolutely correct, President Tollefson. The ABA president the night before last wiped out about 86% of my presentation. So I think Mr. Bertie and I will be relatively efficient and get you guys to lunch in short and good order. I try to bring the same values I brought to my board service to my delegate service, which is trying to be efficient. But I do have another hat in addition to being an ABA delegate, is that I am on the National Conference of Bar Presidents, the DEI committee. And I don't know whether the National Conference of Bar Presidents has canceled its Seattle appearance yet, but given that it's staffed by the ABA, I am 98% certain they will, which is sad for all of you, because there's some really great opportunities for training, and I would encourage all of you to do that because they're really focusing on the future of bars and how to recruit new people in the leadership pipeline. But I will tell you a little bit about why we're here. The bar is trying to make a better effort of having the Board of Governors be informed about the WSBA's ABA activities. And that means coming to you before and after meetings to give you a preview of what's going to happen, give the Board of Governors an opportunity to think about these things if they want to, and tell you what happened afterwards. You are represented by a decently sized delegation based on the size of our bar association. That is Lisa Dickinson, Maggie Smith, Kinnan Williams, Kyle Bertie, who's here with us today, John Felicine, Austin Hatcher, and last but not least, the ever-present, always present everywhere, the amazing Carrie Trasick. And all of these people are selected by this board through the nominations committee and ratification by this board to represent the WSBA. In addition to that, Washington State and the attorneys who belong to the ABA have delegates to go. We all try to coordinate together and have parties and make sure we're talking about issues together. And that delegation is led by James Williams. The ABA House of Delegates is much like the Board of Governors, only gigantic and having 500 plus members. It has the control and administration of the ABA, and it's the policy-making body of the association. It meets twice a year, and it has a number of subsections and committees. It was established in 1936 when the association's present constitution was adopted, which reorganized it into today's form. And the House of Delegates has the ultimate responsibility for establishing policy, both as to administer.
And you could trace all these to Brown?
Oh, obviously. You know, I think that that's the beginning, and that's something that could have been done years before.
I've read, I think that you think that Brown is sort of a precursor of...
This program is a presentation of UCTV for educational and non-commercial use only. From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, Justice Thomas, who is in the room downstairs, distinguished guests and colleagues. Thank you for joining the Law Library of Congress and the United States Supreme Court today for the 2018 Supreme Court Fellows Program Annual Lecture. My name is Jane Sanchez, and I have the honor of serving as the 25th Law Librarian of Congress. A little bit about the library. The Law Library serves as the nation's custodian of a legal and legislative collection of nearly 3 million items from all countries and legal systems of the world. Our foreign law specialists are a diverse group of foreign-trained attorneys who provide information and analysis on over 270 jurisdictions in the world. Our skilled law library staff, both American-trained attorneys and law librarians, also provide research assistance and reference services on U.S. federal and state legal issues. While our collections and our expertise reach across all points of the globe, for today's event, we've partnered with our next-door neighbor, who happens to be the highest court in the country. By the way, they are pretty good neighbors. They're quiet, and they keep to themselves pretty much. This afternoon, we are pleased to be able to collaborate with the Supreme Court as they celebrate their 45th year of the Fellows Program. Please note that today's program is being live streamed on the Library of Congress YouTube channel, so all sounds, images, and remarks will be captured on video. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones and refrain from taking photos on any devices throughout the event. For that, we would thank you. At this time, I would like to invite to the stage Jeffrey P. Menier, Executive Director of the Supreme Court Fellows Program and Counselor to the Chief Justice of the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, for the warm introduction. And thanks to you and the Law Library of Congress for your partnership with the Supreme Court Fellows Program in sponsoring this afternoon's event. Since its creation in 1832, when the great John Marshall was still serving as Chief Justice, the Law Library has been an important resource and steady friend of the court. We could not ask for a better neighbor than the largest law library in the world, and they're pretty quiet too. Let me say just a word about the Supreme Court Fellows Program in my capacity as its Executive Director. Each year, the Supreme Court Fellows Commission, made up of judges and other legal leaders appointed by the Chief Justice, selects 4 talented professionals to spend a year within the federal judiciary.
Hello. Have another one here?
Thank you, like fruit. So I'll take a little piece, and that's it. It's just water, just water.
Okay. Get that.
What is the 10 seconds? 10 seconds is good. It's fresh. The orange was pulled out. It was like that. The orange. So it's fresh. He did it real quick.